Hello, everyone. Welcome to our online video series, Reading Hope in Trying Times. Our guest today is Rabbi Rami Shapiro. Rami is co-director of the One River Foundation, writes the Roadside Assistance for the Spiritual Traveler column for Spirituality and Health magazine, and hosts the magazine's podcast, Essential Conversations with Rabbi Rami. He earned rabbinic ordination from the Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion in 1981, and a PhD in religion from Union Graduate School in 1985. Over the past 40 years, he's been an Air Force chaplain, a congregational rabbi, a business consultant, university professor, and an author of 36 books on religion and spirituality. In 2010, he was initiated into the Ramakrishna order of the Vedanta Hinduism by Swami Swahandra and became a 32-degree Scottish Rite Mason. Several years later, he founded the Order of the Holy Rascal and joined another secret society, the Grand Lodge of All Beings. So we're really glad to have Rabbi Rami with us here today. Thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome. When I hear you list all those things, it's like, how weird is this guy? But Brian, I love my secret society stuff.
Well, just getting past the pronunciation was my first challenge.
Yeah, it is a challenge. If it's, I tell you, if somebody says they have a secret, I got to know what it is. So I'll join to find out. Then you find out there's no real secret. But.
Well, anyway, I really do appreciate you joining us to talk about kind of things that are going on here during this pandemic. Maybe you can just start by sharing your thoughts on that.
Well, I think the pandemic hits people in different ways, clearly. I mean, that's obvious. On a personal level, just me, I've lost my income because most of my income came from, lecturing on the road. You write a book, you don't make any money from writing a book. You make money from talking about the book that you wrote. So that's all dried up. But, being under, I was going to say house arrest, but that's not what it is. But being at home all the time, I'm always at home. I'm an introvert. When I married my wife almost 50 years ago, she said, I'm not sure whether I'm marrying a man or a monk, she said, because I really do like the hermit lifestyle. So on that level, this is pretty good. I have a built-in excuse not to leave my home. Larger level, we've had a death in our family due to COVID-19. I couldn't go to the funeral. I watched them bury my aunt, strangers, lowering into the grave, putting the dirt on the grave. I saw my sister at her house. We were at our house. My son, daughter-in-law, and grandson were at their. I mean, everyone's all over the place watching the burial on Zoom. The rabbi is doing her best to make it somehow connect personally, as is the cantor, both of whom were in different places. But it didn't work. It didn't work. I mean, there's something profoundly human and existential about death, and you really, I would imagine, you really need to be present to death with the deceased and the grieving in order to have the power of the experience do what it's supposed to do, really break your heart and open you up to something deeper. And I love Zoom. We're on Zoom. Thank goodness for Zoom, but Zoom funerals, it doesn't work for me.
Just not for everything, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't work for everything. On an even broader scale, I think the pandemic, as horrifying as it is with almost 100,000 people dead in this country alone and all of this stuff, putting aside the horror of the suffering as far as your health goes, I think that the pandemic reveals the tragic underbelly of our capitalist system. I mean, I'm a capitalist, but I guess only to a certain extent. I didn't think about it until this, where you see the people who prior to the pandemic, the people that we honored, that we celebrated, whose books we read, these were all people we thought were essential to our economy, hedge fund managers, that kind of thing. And now we realize that people who are really essential are the the doctors and nurses, but the school teachers and the home caregivers and the cashiers at the supermarket and the people who are not, I mean, there are exceptions, especially in the medical side, but people who by and large are paid as if they were the least of these, to quote Jesus, in our society, when in fact, the pandemic shows you, no, they're the heart of what makes this system run. And that should, but it won't, that should cause us to consider an economic revolution where we no longer, where we start to value people on a different scale. We start to realize the dignity that they deserve. Yeah, we realize that they deserve a higher level of dignity because of the essential nature of the work they do on our behalf. And I'm sure I left out a bunch of people, first responders and all that. But it's turned things upside down. The question I have is anybody going to do anything about it? And I think the answer is no. I think we'll just go back as soon as we can. I realize the news is skewed, some networks more than others, but I know that, it's edited. So when they show you crazy people doing crazy things, at state houses, liberate the state and it's my right to get a tattoo or whatever it is. I know that those things are spliced together in a certain way to give a certain message, and it works on me, and I notice that it works on me. But when I watch that stuff, I think, I don't think we're learning anything. I think if we're learning anything, we're learning the wrong thing. And that is that the only thing that matters is me, and I don't owe anybody else anything. And if I want a tattoo, I'm going to get a tattoo, and you better be open so I can get one. Or more importantly, and then I'll stop because I could go on about this for a long time, the whole notion of mask wearing or not mask wearing. A mask doesn't protect me. A mask protects you from me. And it seems to me that wearing a mask in a time of pandemic is a fulfillment of what Jesus called, one of the two most important commandments, or, take it from Leviticus 19:18, love your neighbor as yourself. So an act of loving my neighbor is to wear a mask. I'm protecting my neighbor from a disease, even if I don't have it or if I don't know I have it. But people are going out and they're not wearing masks and they're endangering other people, and their excuse is, or their rationale is, I can do what I want. And that's fine in your house. If you want to infect, I don't really mean this, but if you want to infect your intimate, your immediate family, okay, I guess you have a right to do that. I don't really think that's true, but I'm willing to let that go. If you want to make your spouse or your partner ill, if you want to make your kids ill, if you want to, whatever you want to do, I guess that's your business. But again, I hesitate to say that. But you certainly don't have a right to go to a restaurant, which is what I see in my town every day, where people are not social distancing, they're not wearing masks. The staff, the wait staff is doing their best to do that. But people are just refusing to honor the worker by covering their mouth and nose. So I don't think we're learning anything. I think this is the pandemic pulls back the curtain on our faux caring and reveals the true nature of who we are as a society and who we are as people. And there's a lot of dark stuff going on in both.
Well, it's hard to argue, when you see this revealing, our selfishness, our lack of self-discipline, our lack of caring for the common good. That's all coming out in spades.
Yeah.
I hope you're wrong. I hope we do end up learning something as a society and are able to do something about it, but that's certainly far from clear.
Yeah.
I know that there are many people who have seized more sense of empathy, for folks, like you were saying, for all the hordes of, quote unquote, essential frontline workers. But we'll see what ends up actually changing after all.
Yeah. I mean, just one anecdote, and I have a lot more, but I have a friend who works two full-time jobs. And one of them is at a big box store. And the big box store provides her, she's a cashier, with a screen between her and the customer, with a mask, with gloves. They're trying to protect their workers, and they have big signs that say, not literally, but, no shirt, no shoes, no mask, no service, right? That kind of thing. Please social distance and wear a mask. And she had and she says most people don't, but she had this guy come up to her. It's just a few days ago. And it was in the evening, he bought what he bought, and he wasn't wearing a mask. And when he was done, he coughed on her deliberately. Even though there was a screen, he went to the side of the screen and coughed on her, and she felt his spittle on her face. That to me is an assault. That to me is an act of terror.
Wow.
And she had no recourse. All she could do was what they told them to do is raise your hand and request a new mask, which is what she did. But the guy got away with it. And he got it. And I don't know this man, and I don't know what would really happen if he were stopped, but he would probably say something like, "It's my right as an American to do this," which he isn't.
That's just so sad.
Yeah.
Wow. Goodness. Here in New Jersey, there's a lot of people that, what I've seen, limited sample, but when people are going into stores, it's like almost everyone has a mask on. That's been, going pretty well. But when you go over to the boardwalk, or to the beach and see, tons of people there, a lot of them don't have them.
Right.
Now they're outdoors, which I know,
is a difference.
A big, benefit in terms of the breeze and everything. But still, we're in a hot spot.
Yeah.
And, it's, again, I think generally speaking, people have been pretty abiding by a lot of the guidelines, but more exceptions than I would have thought.
Yeah. I have absolute sympathy for people who need to get back to work, to open their salons, to open their schools, their gyms, their, bowling alleys. I understand that. And I'm not, I think it would be self-righteous to say, no, you have to go bankrupt and all your employees are going to go bankrupt and the government isn't going to help you because it probably can't. I think that's completely wrong. I think people, we're going to have to say this is now part of reality and I have to work. So I have absolute sympathy for people who are feeling that way and who are opening their businesses, but no sympathy for people who are taking advantage of that and endangering the worker just because they refuse to be compassionate, kind, smart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned before that, you normally are attending all kinds of different conferences and speaking at them. And I produce several conferences. So I'm kind of curious as to what you're hearing from all the other conference providers about when they think, or if they have any idea, when they will be able to start doing conferences again, in-person conferences again.
Yeah. So, different people have different ways of talking about it. The people who rent space, I think this is the way you do it. You don't have your own retreat center. You go around the country and you rent space. And so I imagine, I don't know, but I won't speak for you, but people who are doing that in my area, in my line of work, who have me come to those kinds of things, they're just waiting. They'll say, well, when it opens up and the space is available, we'll go. And if that space isn't available, we'll find another space, So they're all talking about opening up in the next, well, certainly they're moving things out to 2021, but they're talking about getting back to normal. But a lot of the places I go are physical retreat centers who have no income now because they get their income from, people staying there for a week at a time or more. And those places are really struggling. So I don't know if they'll open up again. And I don't know if they can make up the loss, even if they tried to open up again. And those places, I'm worried about them more for two reasons. Obviously they're at risk of folding, but the loss of retreat centers to our culture is irreplaceable. We live in a society that's just doing. And here are these retreat centers that allow you for a week or longer to just, be, and so I'm tempted, like, we need a balance. So it should be doobie, but I won't do that. I forget the song, doobie, but those places provide an essential element of balance to those who need it. And they should be growing, both the individual ones, but in number around the country. And they're shrinking, if not disappearing. And that really worries me. I don't know where people will go.
Sure. No, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, how can they survive, for another year or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, I look at the magazine I work for, which is hanging in there. Their advertising, and I'm not privy to the finances, but it seems to me, just looking at the magazine itself, a lot of their advertising comes from retreat centers,
Wow.
promoting in-person programming. So it's got this huge ripple effect. And if there's, I don't want to make this to overstate it, but one of the things that a capitalist society needs is a non-capitalist retreat, a place where you can get off the treadmill and or the whatever it's called, the rat race, or the hamster wheel. There we go. I had got my rodents wrong there, but to get off that hamster wheel and go someplace beautiful and someplace quiet and someplace where it's not about what you make or how much you make or the career you've got, but about developing your heart and your soul and all of that. Boy, if we lose those, we're in big long-term trouble.
So one of the other things we've been talking about in this series has been, how God supported us in challenging times in the past, and how, we can draw on that now. You have any thoughts on that?
No. My theology, I don't believe in a self-conscious supernatural being who helps me in this kind of thing at all. I'm on the mystic end of Judaism, and the theology that I follow is a non-dualism that says everything is a manifesting of the divine. The stuff I like, the stuff I don't like, the health and illness. It's Isaiah 45:7, where God says, "I create light and darkness, good and evil. I do all this stuff." So I take that literally, that this is all the working of God, just the way a tsunami is part of the ocean. It can potentially kill hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And it is what the ocean does because it's part of the ocean's nature to do that. But it's not self-conscious. So I wouldn't pray to the ocean to stop a tsunami, and I wouldn't ask the ocean to help me get through the tsunami. So I don't look at God that way. What I do, my theology is such, and it's based in experience, not belief. But my experience tells me that everything is a manifesting of a singular reality, which in Judaism is called God. And, the word for God in Hebrew, the YHVH, which most Bibles translate as Lord, is anything but Lord. It's not hierarchical. It's not static. It's not a noun. It's a verb. And when God reveals God's name to Moses, God reveals this YHVH, and it's from the Hebrew verb, the root word to be, so happening. So I understand God as the happening. Happening is all things that are happening, including COVID-19. When I know that, through chanting and meditation and prayer, whatever other tools that we have, when I know that, I have this deep sense of love for and from everything, because everything is part of me. We're all this happening of the divine. And so what gets me through the pandemic is to allow my heart to be broken as the larger self of which I am a part is being broken. Every death is it sounds simplistic. I've only had, one actual death in my family from COVID, but on a deeper spiritual level, every death is a part of my death. And just as every success with COVID is a part of my success. So can I allow the tragedy to shatter my heart in such a way as to make me more loving? Can I allow the suffering that's going on everywhere to break me open so that I can alleviate suffering at least somewhere? From a Christian perspective, which I appreciate very much, this is the, when you see those paintings of Jesus where his heart is exposed and all this light and love is coming out. I mean, that's what this has the potential to do for all of us, to break us open in such a way that light and love emerge. I don't think it's happening on a mass scale. I think what's happening is people are being broken, but not broken open. They're just being broken, and then they're breaking down, and what compassion they did have, they're losing it in a overwhelming sense of fear and anxiety. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, it's for me, what you're describing, is that, your sense of divinity is having an impact on you.
Oh, yes.
And it's
absolutely. All my life.
To me, that means the same thing as God supporting us, through trying times.
Ah, okay. So I was thinking, when you said it that way, I was thinking of a God up there somewhere who
Yeah, I don't believe that we're puppets either, you know what I mean? And that whole kind of thing. But that's my 2 cents worth. I could be as right or wrong as any of the rest of us. But, my view of divinity, I think is pretty similar to yours in that, and one of my other interviewees said it really well in that, God's already prepared us for this, to the extent that we have gifts. Now's the time for us to use those gifts.
Yeah, right. You'd think this would challenge us to open up the divine toolbox and find those gifts and use them.
Yeah.
But I don't see that. But I'm very pessimistic maybe by nature.
Well, I certainly see it in some people. There's no question.
Oh, yeah, sure.
That there are a lot of people where, that their level of compassion, their level of empathy is increased. How universal, how percentage-wise? I can't say.
Yeah, no, you look at frontline medical worker, nurses. Those people are putting themselves on the line every day because of their compassion. So sure, there's people who are using the toolbox of the divine, and then there are people who are just coughing on other people who are, and who will. I don't know this gentleman, so I don't know for a fact this is the case, but many of the people who talk that way are people who talk God all the time. There was this woman the other day who said, why, she was asked by a reporter, why are you going to church when, you should be, even Jesus said, when you want to pray, go into a closet. And she's going to church, and she said, I'm drenched in the blood of the Lamb and nothing can harm me. That's magic. That's not spirituality. So there's, it's people. So it's a mixed bag.
Yeah. So what kind of spiritual practices or other kinds of resources do you recommend that folks think about? Maybe it's the toolbox analogy that you just used that we should think about using now.
Yeah. So I think there are a lot of things that we could be doing, but let me just mention one in particular. There is a practice from the Buddhist tradition called metta, M-E-T-T-A. You can find it probably in every tradition. Metta means compassion or loving kindness. I've learned it from Buddhist teachers, but the way I actually practice it and what I'll share with you here is what I learned from my rabbi, Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, who's deceased now. But he was, like me, very involved in a host of religions, though his root tradition was Orthodox Judaism, in which I grew up. But so this is the way he taught it. The idea of metta practice is that you are part of a singular reality. I would call it God. You can call it whatever you want, nature, Buddha, Dharma. There's all kinds of different ways, Tao, but I call it God. So we're all a part of God rather than apart from God. We're all a part of God. And what I do over here, because we're all connected, can have impact with what happens somewhere else, like dropping a pebble in a pool and the ripples go out. So Zalman said that his version of meta practice is to just find a quiet place to sit. There's no posture. There's nothing really mystical about it. And to imagine someone that you love, and you work through people you love, you work through people with whom you're struggling, but imagine people who are suffering in this context of COVID-19. You imagine people who are suffering, specific people if you know them, more generic groups if you don't. And you allow that person, I'm just going to do it as an individual, you allow that person to become really present to you in your imagination. And then you say to that person, four fingers here, 4 things. May you be free from fear. May you be free from compulsion. May you be blessed with love. May you be blessed with peace. Free from fear, free from compulsion, blessed with love, blessed with peace. Zalman says that if you're free from fear, love flows in, so then you're blessed with love. If you're free from compulsion, peace flows in and you're blessed with peace. So it's really freeing yourself from the negative, and you don't have to grasp the positive. They simply flow in naturally. It's grace. I do this. Well, the interesting thing is if you do it twice and you do it not slowly, but mindfully. So, may Brian be free from fear. May Brian be free from compulsion. May Brian be blessed with love. May Brian be blessed with peace. So a little bit slower than that. If you do it twice, I think it's the exact amount of time you're supposed to wash your hands. So instead of singing happy birthday to you, so you do it in that, you could time it out for yourself and see what the pace is for you. But what I do is every time I go and wash my hands, I think of someone who I think would benefit from this. And as I'm washing my hands, I say that to them. Does it work? So, I have anecdotal evidence. So my most profound evidence is with my dad. So my dad died a few years ago, but most of our relationship was strained. Not because he didn't love me, but because I wasn't who he wanted. So he loved me as best he could, but I wasn't the boy he wanted. And our entire relationship was strained. And to the point where we didn't really talk. He would answer the phone. When I would call the house, he would always answer the phone because in his mind, men answered the phone, drove the car, and worked. Those are the 3 things that men did. And so he would answer the phone. He'd hear my voice. He'd say, how are you? And I'd say, fine. He goes, here's your mother. And that was the whole conversation. Then my mother went deaf. My mother's still alive. And she's still deaf. And so she couldn't talk on the phone. So he had to talk to me. And it was very strained. And then Zalman said, try the meta practice. So before phone calls, I would imagine him and, picture him in my mind's eye. And I would say, may you be free from fear. May you be free from compulsion. May you be blessed with love. May you be blessed with peace. And over time, short time, the quality of the conversation changed. Now, did my practice influence him? I don't know. Maybe it just changed me. But at some point, we started saying, I love you at the end of the phone call, something we never did. And everything changed at that point. And then our relationship for the last, I don't know, say 10 years of his life, I'd have to look on the calendar to see exactly what that, how long it was, but at least 10 years, I would think, radically changed. And I credit it to this practice. Again, either it changed him or it changed me or it changed us both. I don't know. But I definitely urge people to do this especially when they're washing their hands, because it works. It's much more meaningful than happy birthday.
That's very cool. That's a wonderful suggestion, for a great spiritual practice, so I'll remember that. That's, I think, wonderful. Do you have another one? Is another idea that you want to share?
Well, I get up every morning very early. So this morning I was up at 4:30, and I wash and get ready, and I go right to my meditation spot. I no longer sit on cushions. I can't do that. And and stand up again. But I have a chair that I can sit cross-legged in very comfortably. And I have a whole list of chanting things that I do, and then silent meditation. But another thing that I do that I think is apropos to this time is a mantra practice. So mantra is the repetition of a word or phrase that can influence your thinking over time. I mean, in a sense, it's you are what you think. So there was a rabbi in the 1700s, early 1800s, Reb Nachman of Breslov. And Nachman of Breslov taught, among other things, mantra practice. And of course, he didn't call it mantra, right? In Hebrew, it's called something else, but people would know it as mantra. And the mantra that he recommended, it's in Hebrew, but you can do it in English. I'll give you the translation, was Ha-Rachaman. It's two words. Ha means the. Rachaman, one word. Ha-Rachaman. Rachaman is compassion, or the compassionate one. And it's one of the attributes of, one of the 13 attributes of holiness that are listed in the book of Exodus. And he would say, Nachman would say, just repeat that in your head. You know, Ha-Rachaman, 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 throughout the day. I don't think Nachman said this personally, but other rabbis have said, if you do this consciously for 40 days, it takes root in your brain and it just starts to repeat by itself. You may not even notice it. But what it does, in this case, because we're talking about Ha-Rachaman, the compassionate one. So if I was doing it in English, I would just say compassion, compassion, compassion. What it does is it plants the idea of compassion in you, and then the repetition nurtures it so that it blossoms within you, and you become a vehicle for compassion. So when I'm most, thrown off balance, when I'm most anxious, when I'm most angry, I will consciously go to this mantra. And though I do say it as often as I remember to say it, but I use it consciously. So if I'm in a fearful situation or an anxious situation or an angry situation, if I start silently, because if you do it out loud, they'll probably arrest you and take you to the mental hospital. But silently in my head, I'm just saying Ha-Rachaman, Ha-Rachaman, Ha-Rachaman. The repetition gets associated with a certain state of being. I find that if I'm nervous about something, and I don't mean just slightly, but I'm watching the COVID numbers go up, the deaths go up, or I'm worried about my kids losing their jobs because of this and all this other stuff, or this new thing with little kids getting sick and my 4-year-old grandson. I don't know how they're getting sick, and who knows if he's vulnerable to that. So even though you might think, well, that's, there's millions of kids and very, very, very few are getting sick, I don't care. To me, it's, does he have it or not have it? Maybe a scientist will tell me, oh, it's a fraction of a percent that he can get sick. To me, it's 50-50. He's got it or he doesn't. So math is not my strong point, but the anxiety for that is there. When I notice the anxiety, I notice that my body tenses, my breathing becomes shallow. I get very defended. And by switching over to, in my case, Ha-Rachaman, that changes instantaneously. Now, I know the science behind it, and I've been told by people who study this stuff at universities with, technology, plugging people's brains in to see what happens. They say it takes about 18 minutes of a repetition to shift from the fear center to the compassion center. I think that once you get accustomed to doing the practice, it happens much faster.
Interesting.
So I've been doing this for a very, very long time, decades. So maybe I'm not a good example. But if I'm in that kind of situation and I immediately consciously go to Ha-Rachaman, 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 this just becomes this. And my shallow breathing naturally deepens. I'm not controlling my breath. I'm not relaxing my body. I'm repeating the mantra. And it unlocks my body from the fear that is gripping it. And I don't know anything else that does that. Now, there's nothing magic about the word harachaman. It's just what he taught. Other rabbis taught other Hebrew words. You can go to any Hindu system and find other mantra that are available. There are in the I can't remember the name, Worldwide Christian Meditation Movement. Brother Freeman in England started it. And in their movement, I think they use the final words of the book of Revelations, where it says, Maranatha, come Lord. And they tell people to say Maranatha, Maranatha, or come Lord, come Lord. The words themselves, I don't think matter. I mean, some people will say they do, but I think if you use pepperoni, it would work. But I'm not recommending that as a mantra. But so I'm not saying there's magic in the words, but there's something alchemical transformation that happens in the act of repeating. So in the Jewish tradition, you find your mantra, you say it for 40 days. If you forget or you stop doing it, the understanding from the rabbis is not your fault, wrong word. So find another one and you try it again. They say if you can get through 40 days of repeating this, not all day long, because you'll forget during the day, but every day you'd spend some time doing it. By the time you finish the 40 days, it'll be locked into your head. It will take care of itself. And that's your mantra. If you get 39 days and you skip the 40th day, it was probably not your word. So, go find another one. But these two practices are central to what I do, in addition to a lot of very esoteric meditation stuff. But these two things are practical. I can attest to the transformation that they deliver, the transformation they promise. And I would recommend them to anybody. Just make it fit your tradition or your personality.
Those are great. Those are really wonderful. So, and I can really see how they could impact people significantly.
Good.
So Rami, I just want to really thank you for joining us. It was a wonderful conversation. I'm really glad that we were able to spend some time together. So thank you so much for that.
Brian, it was great. Thank you very much for having me.